Hello everybody, Mike here at Game From Scratch, and today I'm going to do an introduction to the Armory3D game engine. Now this game engine just hit its patron funding goals, and it's going to be available in a much easier downloadable form any day now. Basically the version I'm using should be available to everybody to get started, and I'm excited about this. This is probably the game engine I've been most excited about in the last year or two, so it's kind of cool that it's finally at least almost here. So hopefully it'll be up any day now. And today I'm going to just try and basically, I don't know, show you why I'm so excited about this game engine, and hopefully get some of you guys excited about it as well. Also, it is a game engine that plugs into and extends the Blender application. So if you're a current Blender game engine user who's a little sad about what's happening in Blender 2.8, Armory could be a great replacement for you. So again, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail here because, well, spoiler alert, I'm actually going to do a full tutorial series on this engine after the fact. So this is more of a, here's what Armory3D is, and hopefully this also gets you excited to go check it out. Now, Armory is available at Armory3D. Hopefully any day now you'll be able to click this download link and get the version I'm using, which is a simple zip file you extract out. Part of their hitting their funding goals was they were going to make that available to everybody. So again, hopefully that comes up any day now. It's supposed to. So it's just a zip file, you download it, and I will show you the rest in a moment. Also keep in mind, Armory3D is actually open source. You can build it yourself from source code. It's not an easy process, which is why I like the turnkey version that we'll all be able to use very soon. On top, there's a number of tutorials and templates and examples to get going, as well as some pretty solid documentation. A little spotty at spots, but for the most part, quite well documented as a game engine. And there's a huge amount of examples, as we will see in a second. So once you've downloaded the zip, once of course the zip is made available, it's available right now in two versions. One that runs in Blender 2.7.9 and earlier, and in 2.8. On top of that, there's also kind of two versions, an add-on version and like the full-blown version. So in the add-on version, basically it's an extension to Blender itself. I don't actually have any idea how to configure it because I'm using the full version, which is a heck of a lot easier. And that actually ships with a copy of Blender, in this case, Blender 2.8. Once again, if you don't want to move to 2.8, and really you should not be developing games on it, it is very heavily under development. There is the other version available, but each one actually has a copy of Blender already configured inside of it, as well as a copy of a code IDE. So once you've downloaded it, go ahead and run it. You might get a permissions thing like I just did. You can safely ignore it. And here you go. This is typical normal Blender. Nothing too exciting going on. But what this is basically, the Armory3D game engine is a Haxe powered, built over top of the K-H-A framework for basically developing cross-platform games. So we move away from some of the biggest problems that the Blender game engine had. Blender game engine had the GPL2 license, the lesser GPL I think it was, and it's a terrible license. It's probably the biggest reason why Blender game engine didn't take off. And on top of that, Blender game engine did not have good cross-platform support, whereas Ka is actually kind of amazing. Haxe is a very portable language. You should be able to run Ka on different consoles, all different mobile devices, in the web browser, etc. So that's one of the really cool things with this engine. And as I mentioned, it is actually fully embedded into Blender. So if you're not a Blender user, this is going to be a little daunting at first because you'll have to learn the Blender interface and the underlying Armory game engine stuff, but it's worth the investment, and you're going to probably need to learn something like Blender anyways to go ahead and create your art assets, etc. So having it all in one place, it kind of actually takes away the art pipeline. You're developing your content, authoring your content, creating your levels, and then, you know, potentially writing your code all in one environment. So you can see here, it's actually extended. So I'm in the camera pane. You go on down here and you'll see a couple of settings here for the Armory player. So we've got Armory player, Armory exporter, Armory project, render path, and bake. And then also you can go ahead and grab a project. When you've got something in your scene, you can also go ahead and attach properties to it, including called Armory traits. And what this allows you to do is basically attach scripts to it. And there's two ways of scripting. One is like a visual programming language built directly into Blender. And the other one is using the Haxe programming language. And we'll look at both in a second. I'm actually going to go ahead and choose one of those templates. Now, as I mentioned back here, there is the template. That's what we were using right here. Just go ahead and download that using Git. And I've already done that, so we'll just go ahead and file, open. I think I've opened it recently. Yep. So we're using the third-person template specifically built for 2.8, unless I loaded the wrong one, which is why we just crashed. Yep. All right, my bad. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is also a 0.4 release. So you are going to have some issues at times. And I'm also running in a very much under development, heavily experimental version of Blender 2.8. So if you want more stability, I do recommend you run with the 2.79 version. Now, if you're an existing Armory user, do be aware for some reason, since they've moved to the 8 target, for some reason, the run-in viewport functionality is now broken for Armory 4. All right, without further ado, let's try and open up again. I'll actually directly go to the directory. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so thirdperson.blend. All right, this is not going well. I'm going to make sure I'm running on my GPU. I'll be right back. All right, not sure what combination of magic I did to make that finally work, but again, beta version, expect some issues. So here we are. This is your typical Blender scene. A game's been created for us. You can see all the things that go together to create this world. There's our guy right there. There's some instructions on how to go about using this. And you could actually go ahead and build your scene right there. Click that guy and build. And basically it's running in the background. So we can come up here. It's easier to do this before you start the build. But you can bring up your system console. And you can see in the background what's actually going on as part of the build. So we'll let that finish up. See, there it goes, done. 14 seconds to do that build, not so bad. And you got a couple of options here. You can actually run, you can play your game out this way, and it'll actually play it in a window. So this is the scene that we've created right here. And here it is running. So this is what we were working on. It's pretty cool stuff. So it's one of the starter templates. Typical third-person shooter style controls with physics set up, etc. Nothing overwhelmingly, but it does get you going. Now let's go ahead and escape out of that. Excuse me, sorry about that. Or what we can also do is just switch over to this guy right here and actually run it directly in Blender itself. So this is going to load it up in the viewport. Make sure it's built and run. And there we go. We're actually running it directly inside of the Blender engine, which is pretty cool. Go ahead and get out of there though. So let's switch back to textured mode and we stop running. So there is how a scene is composed. Now in this particular case, it's actually using Haxe for the entirety of the programming. So we come over here and we can see Code Studio. But what I should actually point out is all of these items in the world. So grab this cube, for example. You'll notice it actually, you can set up. So these are all rigid bodies using the built-in Blender physics. Same way as if you go to the one, the one corner here, there's actually a particle system going on. So it integrates tightly with all of the Blender functionality. And in the future, it's actually going to implement the EEV real-time rendering engine that's going to be the core of Blender 2.8. So that's pretty cool stuff. But again, at any time, you can also run externally like this. And you can also run it in a variety of different ways. So Crom is sort of like a virtual machine that Haxe provides, but you could also build it to C++. So I've got Visual Studio installed on this machine. I can go ahead, C++, and this will actually automatically compile it using my Visual C++ install. Takes some time, so I'm not going to demonstrate it, but this is how you would make a native build for various different platforms, or I can actually straight out build and run from my browser. So I'll go ahead and do that. So run it in the browser, go ahead and play. It's going to do the build in the background, but this is making a browser version 4. So that's how easy it is to support the variety of different platforms. So the C++ for native porting it across different platforms, or in the Crom virtual machine right in the Haxe itself, or as you can see right here, assuming this all works out right, and we'll go ahead and allow that access in the browser. Exact same content. Let's see if this actually works, mind you. Dun, dun, dun. I'm going to pause this just in case it doesn't, so we got a lot of dead silence. And you may notice some sleight of hand here in that I switched over to Chrome as opposed to my default of Edge. But once you get a browser that supports WebGL 2 properly, which is weird because Edge should, here you see it running in a browser. So very cross-platform engine. Very cool to see. As you can see, we got a little bit of an issue with WebGL going on there, but we'll just ignore that and pretend it didn't happen. So head on back over to Blender. Very powerful stuff going on here. And what we've seen, as I mentioned earlier, this one is actually using Haxe. And the full-blown version has an IDE called Code Studio available. Now, Code Studio is basically an extension of Microsoft's Visual Studio Code, which is a lightweight cross-platform, one of the greatest open source code editors available right now. In fact, you can actually add the plugins, etc. to Visual Studio Code to almost basically turn it into Code Studio. But this is an integrated IDE for doing code development. And here you can see the underlying get rid of that. The underlying code controlling this particular game. So you can see we've got two different classes going on. We got gun control, and we got a third-person controller. This is where the majority of your logic is. And you see it's just straight-out Haxe code. Now, if you've never used Haxe before, it's kind of like the bastard love child of C++ and ActionScript. It's a great little language. I actually am quite a fan of it, and it's very cross-platform. Now, another thing that's going on here is they've got a framework underneath it that they've written themselves. It's open source. You can grab it yourself, called Iron. And Iron seems to be, the best I can come up with it is, it's like a data binding service. But this is the way to hook back up your data from the one end to the other. So you can see here their data, they're getting sound data, going ahead and setting it, etc. But the code is quite clean. Now, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here because, like I said, I'm going to do a tutorial down the road. But if you are a traditional straight-out programmer, you can code entirely this way. But what you'll notice here is you are integrating back to, so here we're saying like find animation, get child of armature. So head on back over here, you'll see armature. Somewhere, probably under, oh, of course it's not alphabetical. Player probably has armature. So right there. So basically they're getting the child of player of type armature and getting detail of it. So ultimately they're going to be getting one of these maximal rigs, bolts, etc. Well, here you can see the binding to get that. So here's how you can interface back to the Blender scene graph. Very transparent, very simple and straightforward to work with. And it's this get child by name kind of setup. Very clean. It will all become pretty intuitive once you understand both Blender and the underlying Armory way of doing things. And code's pretty, clean. Even if you have just JavaScript programming experience, Swift, etc., you will understand Haxe. It's not a really incredibly complicated programming environment. But I'm going to move on from that because, frankly, again, I'll go into this in more depth when I get into an actual tutorial series. So let's head on back over to Blender. And here we are, back in Blender. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can actually attach and work with a visual script as well. And let's do that from scratch. So I'm going to show you actually the process of creating a new Armory3D game project from scratch. So it's simple. Basically, you need a blend file as your root. So we'll create a new file. We will save this guy as c:/temp. Go to that folder. We'll make a new directory called my demo. And we will open my demo and we will call this guy, I don't know, my demo sounds like a good idea. So we're basically creating a blend file called my demo, and we'll save it to that folder. Now back here to the camera, just go on down for the first time and do a build. And it will have just created your project. Now, I always do a build first because I've had some issues with scripting if I don't. So just follow that order of operations and everything will be good. So now we head on back over to the folder I just created. So c:/temp/my demo. And you'll see there's the blend file that we just saved as. This is just a backup of it. But you notice it also created this caw.js, which is sort of like the project file of sorts. And it's creating the sources file. So main.haxe is being actually handled for us. But any of the code we create will go in here. So if I wanted to go ahead and add my own code file to it, I come on back here. Let me just shut that guy down. I can come on back over here. And I could just select this guy, go to his properties. I could go to Armory traits and we'll just add a new one. And you'll see here I have options. I can add a Haxe trait or I can add nodes. So Haxe, I would basically just say create a new script and it'll create a script in that subdirectory I just showed you. But what we're instead going to show this time is nodes. And to do that, we are going to need the node editor up. So let's just expand this guy out and let's switch over here instead to the node editor. And where's my toolbar? Confused. 1 second. Okay, the toolbar has now been turned into a drop-down. So I'm going to switch here and go to a logic tree node, and we're just going to create a new one. So call this box controller. So we've just created a new node that is going to control this guy right here. So if it is not attached already, so we'll go to nodes, and we'll just go ahead and attach it. So box controller is now controlling this box. So we can come down here and we can add some nodes in. So you see here's all the various different nodes, programmable graph nodes that are available to us. Now, if you've ever done any blueprint programming, you'll immediately understand exactly what's going on here. Same with Godot's visual scripting language. It's the same basic idea. And this is also very similar to the way Blender Game Engine used to program things. And you're basically just creating a tree of nodes. I'll show you one. So input, so we'll do on keyboard So on keyboard right here, and we'll just drop that node in. And we'll zoom that down so we can see. So what you can see is this node is going to be fired whenever a keyboard event happens, and it has this out pin. So the out pin is going to drag to whatever task we're going to do. And you just basically continue connecting these pins to other pins to create the program flow that you want. So I'm going to stick with the space bar. So we'll have that as my option. So on the space key, released, and then we're just going to go ahead and add another node. And this one we will just do, so we could do physics. Here we'll do physics. So I'll show you physics integration in here. So here we are in Blender itself. Go back here to our toolbox. And again, if you don't know Blender, don't worry too much. It's not that daunting, but I'm gonna go ahead and add a rigid body constraint. No rigid body world to add this to. Okay, they've changed things slightly. Just a second. Oh, no, I just clicked the wrong button. Rigid body. There we go. So this guy will now fall as soon as the world starts, and we're not really going to want that. So what we're going to do is just move this guy up slightly. We will add another object to our scene. So add mesh. We'll create a plane. Oops, I went the wrong way on that. So scale. Oops. All right. So there we go. We got our cube in the scene, and we've got this plane for it to hit. We'll also make that guy a rigid body, and we will make that guy passive. So this guy is active. If we go ahead and actually play our game now as it is, we'll go ahead and run that. And here you'll see not much. We'll go over here. We'll actually play it in the browser. Nothing too exciting. All right, so let's grab our guy, move it along the Z-axis. And okay, physics should be kicking in. Am I missing something? Let's go back over here to physics. Active mass, give it a mass of 100 kilos. Okay, should be active. Enable Armory property, angular, So you see here, you've got Armory settings you can do for your physics settings, but this should be pretty normal. I want to just make sure that gravity is set, right? I believe that's over here. Rigid body world, speed, Gravity is Z -9. Okay, 1 second. All right, gonna come down here, set its rigid body to a box, go back over here to our editor, and I'm gonna switch this guy out instead of scene to viewport. So basically it'll show what we see here, and we'll go ahead and play that. And there you go. There is physics interacting in our scene. Pretty cool stuff. So once that's actually run, so now let's go ahead and add something. So on keyboard press, drag that out. So now we're gonna go ahead and add a visual node. We'll make this a physics node, and we are going to say add an impulse. So we're gonna apply an impulse. We'll select our cube like so. So again, as I mentioned, it's a flow chart. So the out goes to the in. So after this, this occurs. And we can keep chaining them as we go out like that. And we're applying an impulse, and we can basically pick what kind of impulse. So I'm gonna say 100 on the Z-axis. Now I got no idea what that actually does. Like unit-wise, I'm just playing from here. So we might actually just make this absolutely fly off the screen. So I guess we'll find out in a second. And we'll go ahead and run that. So there you go, our cube falls, spacebar. All right, that's not a whole lot of impulse. Let's go on back. So shut that down. And we will instead change that to a whole lot more. And now we'll stop and play. And then hit the spacebar, and okay, that might be a little too high. Yeah, it'll drop back down from wherever it ended up anyways. But as you saw, basically we're applying a force to it when we hit that key. And this is your other option for scripting. All right, I'm not gonna wait for it to fall. It's probably way off screen. So you probably want some number somewhere in between. Let's do 10,000 and then I'll continue on because I wanna get this somewhere right before we go. Fall, space, whoop. All right, so there's still a whole lot of force going on, but eventually gravity is going to kick into that guy and it's going to fall back to Earth. But you get the idea of exactly what we're dealing with here. And that is, in a nutshell, Armory3D. Now, I don't want to go into too much more detail because I, again, am going to do a full tutorial series on this guy. And I'm probably going to do it in Blender 2.79 because, frankly, 2.8 just isn't ready for prime time yet, even though I really enjoy using it. Yeah. So again, there are the two ways of programming. You could do a straight out game engine style, fully in code editor using the underlying Haxe programming language, and then you can also make use of the CAW framework underneath the cross-platform multimedia framework, the Iron class for linking back into Blender itself. And you get this really nice seamless connectivity between the two environments. But again, the nice thing is you also get cross-platform ability out of it all. So that is really cool. And yeah, I think that's all we're going to cover today. That is Armory. So basically, it is a game engine that exists inside of Blender itself, but goes beyond that. So it's capable, it's a full-blown game engine that just happens to use Blender as its host. So as its content creation system, as its content pipeline, and as its world editor. And the cool thing is, once again, you've got this ability to actually run directly in the viewport itself and simulate your game there. So yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. And as you saw from this demo, it's actually already being developed to work with 2.8. And there's some talk about potentially some tighter integration going on with Blender Foundation in the future. So this is an engine that is going to get a lot of attention going forward. All right, so that's where I'm going to end things. I hope I piqued your interest in this engine, and I hope you're as excited about it as I am now. Now, granted, if you hate Blender, this is not going to change your mind. You're definitely not going to want to go ahead and work with Armory if you don't like Blender. But if you're already using Blender, Armory could be the perfect 3D game engine for you. It does take a step out, and it's a good, solid cross-platform game engine with two very mature systems. Again, you've got this complex built-in visual scripting system that you want, or you've got the ability to attach CAW scripts, or sorry, Haxe scripts, or you can mix and match however you wish to go. So you've got something that's nice there for the designer or quick for prototyping, or you've got things for, the straight-out coder. And the coder never really even has to come into Blender. So you can have your designer work and create the game content, and the other person works 100% on the code side of things. And just like your traditional separation with game engines. All right, so I'm rambling at this point. I'll end it there. And I do have a question before I leave. I am doing a tutorial series on this. It's not a matter of if, it's just I am going to be doing it. And my question to you guys is, should I cover Blender as well? Do you want me to go through the process of creating a game using Armory and Blender, or should I assume that you already know how to use Blender, or should I kind of do it, here's an intro to Blender, and now here's Armory. I've done a couple tutorials on Blender, and I'm kind of a little hesitant to do a 2.79 tutorial when it's all going to be somewhat obsoleted when 2.8 releases in a couple of months, or a year, who knows how far out that is going to be. And there's another problem with it. Do I wait for that release to come? Because this user interface, well, the last time I loaded up this guy, this wasn't here, and I had a toolbar for doing this. So it is expanding at a rapid pace. So any tutorial I do in 2.8 would be quickly obsoleted. So I'm a little hesitant there. So let me know what you guys want me to do. Do you want me to do, here's how to use Armory on its own, or here's how you use Armory with Blender 2.79, and then do it updated when 2.8 comes out? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, let me know what you think of Armory down below. Also keep in mind, if you do decide to check it out for yourself, I just used one of the actual templates. If you head on over to the actual GitHub sources and you go to their examples folder right here, Armory examples, you will find little tutorials on showing you basically how to do a lot of individual tasks. So if you're trying to figure out how to do things like play a sound, this is just a straight out simple example showing how to play a sound file using code in this particular case. So there are a bunch of blend files you can download and learn individual aspects. So if you're not waiting for me to go ahead and create a tutorial system, do keep in mind there are a good number of examples there. So if you want to learn from experimentation, those options are all there. All right, that was quite a bit to cover in 24 minutes, but that is the Armory game engine. Hopefully you'll be able to download the zip that I am using right now, and that makes it really easy to go ahead and jump in. Now, building it from source is definitely a complicated process, so you may want to wait for the formal release. Like I said, right now it does show like you've got to purchase it if you go to the download link, and that is changing very soon. So as soon as there is a proper download here, I highly recommend you check out the Armory game engine. And you know what? If you're currently afraid of Blender because people tell you that the UI is so hard and scary, etc., don't worry. It's not as bad as people make it out to be. In fact, I have a Blender tutorial series already that walks you from absolutely no knowledge to creating a game-ready animated sprite in less than a day. So if you're interested in learning Blender, do check that out in the link below. I will also throw in a link for Armory3D itself, as well as the GitHub archive. So if you're interested in checking checking it out. It's all available there. And once again, hopefully that download link is there soon. All right, that's it for now. Hope you all found that as interesting as I do, and I will talk to you all later. Goodbye.